My name is Ashley, and I'm the oldest of 3 children. My father, Robert, ran his own construction business, while my mother, Margaret, worked part-time at some import-export trading company. Then there were the twins, Brittany and Brandon, who were 6 years younger than me. They were always the golden children, the ones who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. From the moment the twins were born, my role in the family changed dramatically. I wasn't just a big sister. I became their living nanny, housekeeper, and personal assistant, all rolled into one. While other kids my age were enjoying their childhood, I was picking up the twins from school, helping them with their homework, and dragging them to various after-school activities. The house was my responsibility too. Cleaning, cooking, grocery shopping, you name it, I did it. Meanwhile, Brittany and Brandon didn't lift a finger. They'd come home, drop their backpacks wherever they pleased, and leave a trail of mess behind them like it was their job. One particularly frustrating afternoon when I was about 15, a boiling resentment finally gave me the courage to confront my parents about this unfair arrangement. "Mom, Dad," I said during dinner, trying to keep my voice steady despite the tremor of anger within me. "Why am I the only one who has to do all the housework? Brittany and Brandon never help with anything." Mom put down her fork and gave me that look, the one that made me feel like I was being utterly ridiculous for even asking. "Honey, that's just how things work in families. The oldest child always has more responsibilities." "But that's not true," I protested, my voice rising with indignation. "I've been to Sarah's and Jessica's houses, and their families split the chores equally between all the kids." "Those families are raising their children wrong," Mom snapped, her face hardening into a mask of disapproval. "Is that what this is about? You've been getting ideas from your friends." The twins exchanged knowing smirks across the table. They thrived on the friction between Mom and me. Later that week, I tried talking to Brittany and Brandon directly about helping out more, hoping for some semblance of understanding. "Why don't you guys ever help with the housework?" I asked them while we were supposedly doing their homework, though I was doing most of it. Brittany rolled her eyes with dramatic flair. "Mom says we need to focus on our studies and activities. That's our main task." "Yeah," Brandon chimed in with a smug grin that infuriated me. "You're supposed to do all that stuff. Mom told us so." But it wasn't just about the chores. The twins seemed to take perverse pleasure in making my life harder. They'd deliberately mess up rooms I'd just cleaned or break things, and then, with innocent-looking eyes, blame it on me. Sometimes, they'd even lie to our parents, claiming I hadn't helped them with their homework or forgotten to buy something they'd specifically asked for, painting me as negligent and uncaring. My senior year of high school should have been exciting, a time filled with college applications, campus visits, and dreams of the future stretching out before me like an open highway. Instead, it became yet another stark reminder that in my family, I would always come second to the precious twins. I remember the evening clearly. I was sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by glossy college brochures that whispered promises of independence and growth, when my parents came home. They had that carefully neutral look on their faces, the one they always wore when they were about to deliver bad news that invariably affected me. "Ashley, we need to talk about college," Dad started, his gaze skittering away from mine as if he couldn't bear to witness my reaction. Mom jumped in, her voice unnervingly matter-of-fact. "We've been looking at our finances, and we just don't have the money for your college education. All our savings need to go toward the twins' future education." The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. I sat there numbly staring at the brochures that now seemed to mock me with their promises of bright futures and new beginnings. Futures and beginnings that were apparently not meant for me. "But I've been working so hard," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper, thick with disbelief and a rising tide of despair. "My grades are good. I could get scholarships." "The decision is final, Ashley," Mom cut me off, her tone leaving no room for argument. "We have to think about Brittany and Brandon's future." "What about my future?" I asked, my voice trembling as I fought back the hot sting of tears. "You're resourceful, honey," Dad said, patting my shoulder awkwardly, a gesture that felt hollow and insincere. "You'll figure something out." That night, I lay in bed, the twins' laughter echoing from their room down the hall, a sound that felt like a cruel taunt. They already knew. I could tell by the smug satisfaction that had flickered in their eyes during dinner. Once again, they were getting everything while I got nothing. But something snapped in me that night. Instead of succumbing to the familiar wave of despair, a fierce, burning anger ignited within me, a refusal to be relegated to the shadows any longer. The next day, fueled by a newfound resolve, I started job hunting. Within 2 weeks, I had lined up a position at an entry-level corporate job. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough for me to rent a tiny one-bedroom apartment. The day after graduation, I packed my meager belongings and moved out, leaving behind the suffocating atmosphere of my childhood home. The years that followed were hard. I worked my tail off, taking every training opportunity my company offered, volunteering for extra projects, and slowly, painstakingly, climbed the corporate ladder. While I didn't have a college degree, I had something arguably more valuable: real-world experience and a fierce, unwavering determination to succeed. Meanwhile, the twins got their college education just as planned. Mom and Dad miraculously found plenty of money for their tuition, housing, and extravagant expenses. They graduated with fancy degrees and even fancier attitudes about it. The irony wasn't lost on me. Brittany couldn't hold down a job for more than 3 or 4 months, always concocting some elaborate excuse about why each position wasn't the right fit for her supposed talents. And Brandon? He was working as a warehouse supervisor, a job that definitely didn't require the expensive business degree our parents had gone into debt for. But oh, how they loved to bring up their college education at every excruciating family gathering. Well, as someone with a degree in business administration, Brittany would start, giving me that condescending sideways look she'd perfected over the years. You know, back in college, Brandon would chime in, never wanting to be outdone in the bragging department. I'd just sit there sipping my wine, a quiet amusement bubbling inside me as I thought about my salary, which was more than their combined incomes. Sometimes, I had to discreetly hide a smile behind my glass when they started pontificating about the merits of higher education while clearly living paycheck to paycheck, still reliant on Mom and Dad for financial support. One day, during my lunch break, I was mindlessly scrolling through my social media feed when I saw my cousin Sarah's post. There she was, radiant in a gorgeous emerald green dress, beaming at the camera. The caption read, "Can't wait for Aunt Margaret's big celebration." I froze, my sandwich halfway to my mouth. My mother's birthday wasn't for another few weeks, and I hadn't heard a single word about a celebration. Maybe I was jumping to conclusions, I told myself. Perhaps it was for something else entirely. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before I typed, "Beautiful dress, what's the celebration for?" Sarah's response came almost immediately. "For Aunt Margaret's 55th birthday party. It's going to be amazing. How haven't you started planning your outfit yet?" I felt like I'd been plunged into an icy lake. My own mother was planning a significant birthday celebration, and I, her eldest daughter, knew absolutely nothing about it. My hands were shaking as I pulled up my phone contacts and called my mother. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice brisk and impatient. "Ashley, what is it? I'm rather busy right now." "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the hurt that clawed at my throat. "I just saw Sarah's post about your birthday party. Why haven't I heard anything about it?" There was a distinct pause on the other end of the line, then a small, dismissive sigh. When she finally spoke again, her voice had that familiar, condescending tone I'd grown up hearing. "Oh, that. Well, Ashley, I didn't invite you because, well, I don't want you there." I actually pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it for a moment, as if the inanimate object could somehow explain the cruelty of those words. Sure, I must have misheard. "What do you mean you don't want me there? I'm your daughter." "Yes, well," she cleared her throat, the sound amplifying my growing dread. "The thing is, Ashley, this is going to be quite an upscale event. There will be a lot of important people there, people from high society, your father's business associates, my friends from the country club. And frankly, I'd be embarrassed to introduce you. You don't have a college degree, Ashley. What would I say when people ask what you do? It would be uncomfortable." I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to my own mother essentially tell me I wasn't good enough to attend her birthday party, that my very presence would be a source of shame for her. "So Brittany and Brandon are invited?" I asked, already knowing the answer with a sickening certainty. Of course they are, she replied, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. They're college graduates. They understand how to conduct themselves in sophisticated company. I thought about Brittany, perpetually unemployed, and Brandon, toiling away in a warehouse, but apparently, their precious degrees magically imbued them with social grace. I see, I said, my voice sounding strangely distant and detached even to my own ears. So that's really how you feel about me? Oh, don't be so dramatic, Ashley, she huffed, her tone laced with exasperation. This is exactly why I didn't want to have this conversation. You always make everything into such a scene. I'd always known, on some level, that my mother favored the twins, but this was different. This wasn't just preferential treatment or casual neglect. This was my own mother explicitly stating that she was ashamed of me, that I wasn't worthy of being seen with the family in public. The depth of her rejection was a cold fist clenching around my heart. I barely slept that night, my mother's cruel words replaying on an endless loop in my head. By morning, a fragile hope flickered within me. My father couldn't possibly agree with this. He'd always been more reasonable, even if he did indulge the twins' every whim. I needed to hear his side of things, to find some sliver of understanding. I drove to my parents' house the next morning, rehearsing what I'd say in my head, clinging to the desperate hope that he would offer some solace. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed both Brittany's and Brandon's cars were there too. Great. The whole dysfunctional family was home for this inevitable showdown. Mom answered the door with an exasperated look, as if I were a persistent door-to-door salesperson, interrupting her oh-so-important day. Ashley, what are you doing here? I need to talk to Dad, I said, my voice tight with unshed tears as I pushed past her into the house. They were all in the living room, Dad in his usual armchair, the twins sprawled on the couch like entitled royalty. Dad, I started, my voice already shaking with the weight of my hurt and anger. Did Mom tell you about our conversation yesterday? What do you think about it? He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his gaze fixed on some invisible point on the carpet. I think your mother's right. It would be better if you didn't come. The words hit me like a physical slap, stealing what little breath I had left. I looked around the room at these people who were supposed to be my family, their faces impassive, devoid of any empathy. All of you feel this way? Brittany rolled her eyes with theatrical annoyance. Nobody wants you there, Ashley. Brandon nodded in agreement, a rare moment of solidarity with his sister. For once, can't you just accept something without making it into a huge deal? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So none of you see anything wrong with excluding me from a family celebration? Don't you realize how unbelievably unfair this is? It's been like this my entire life. The twins are the favorites, and I'm constantly pushed into the background. You don't even see me as part of this family anymore. See? Brittany jumped up, pointing a manicured finger at me accusingly. This is exactly why we don't want you there. You're such a drama queen, Ashley. Always making scenes, always reacting negatively to everything. Every time something good happens to us, you try to ruin it with your bitter attitude. You're just jealous because Brandon and I made something of ourselves while you— That's enough, I cut in, my voice rising with a fury I could no longer contain. Made something of yourselves? You can't hold a job for 3 months, and Brandon's working in a warehouse. The only thing you've made of yourselves is a joke. Ashley, Mom gasped, clutching her pearls as if I'd just committed some unspeakable social faux pas. I turned to my father, desperately seeking some flicker of support in his eyes, but his face had hardened into an unyielding mask. I think it's time for you to leave, he said firmly, his voice devoid of any warmth. This conversation is over. Leave our house immediately. I stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled in their frames. As I got into my car, I could see them through the living room window, their heads already huddled together, no doubt dissecting my dramatic exit. But I didn't care anymore. They had finally shown their true colors, each and every one of them. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but sometimes life hands you an opportunity that's too perfectly ironic to pass up. That's exactly what happened 2 weeks before my mother's birthday. I was grabbing lunch at this little cafe downtown. Not my usual spot, but my regular place was packed. As I waited for my order, I glanced around the room, and that's when I saw her. My mother, Margaret, was sitting in a corner booth, trying to be inconspicuous, in a ridiculously oversized, wide-brimmed hat. But I'd recognize that rigid, self-important posture anywhere. She wasn't alone. Sitting across from her was a man I'd never seen before. He was probably in his early 40s, impeccably dressed in a tailored business suit, and definitely not my father, Robert. As I watched, a knot of disbelief tightening in my stomach, he reached across the small table and gently touched her hand, and she giggled. Actually giggled, a high-pitched, girlish sound I'd never associated with my perpetually composed mother. My phone was in my hand before I even consciously registered the thought. I pretended to be engrossed in social media, carefully angling the camera in their direction. Click, another lingering touch. Click, a shared conspiratorial laugh. Click. After about an hour of this clandestine rendezvous, they got up to leave. I waited a few discreet moments, my heart pounding with a mixture of shock and a dawning sense of grim satisfaction, then followed them. They got into his car, a sleek black Mercedes that screamed success, and I followed in my aging sedan, keeping a safe distance, my mind racing with the implications of what I was witnessing. The Mercedes stopped at a red light, and I managed to get several clear shots of them kissing passionately, completely oblivious to the mundane world around them. The Mercedes then pulled up to the grand entrance of the Grand Plaza Hotel, the most luxurious hotel in the city. I parked across the street, my hands trembling slightly as I watched them walk in, hands clasped together like teenagers in the throes of first love. I got it all on video. Their entrance, the way they checked in with hushed whispers and furtive glances, how they couldn't keep their hands off each other as they waited for the elevator, their bodies pressed close. Back at my small apartment, a whirlwind of conflicting emotions churned within me. Disgust, certainly. A strange sense of vindication, undeniably. And then a cold, calculating resolve began to take root. I wasn't going to let her get away with this, not after everything. A quick internet search of the Mercedes license plate number led me to his social media profiles. He wasn't hard to find. Richard Thompson, successful real estate developer, office in downtown, married with 3 kids. The irony was almost comical. I spent the next few days meticulously preparing everything. First, I had the photos professionally printed in a large format. The one of them kissing in the car came out particularly well, a stark and undeniable piece of evidence. The hotel entrance footage went onto a sleek USB drive, along with several other damning clips I'd managed to capture. I bought the most elegant gift box I could find, a sophisticated cream color with delicate gold trim. Each photo I carefully rolled into a tight tube and tied with a shimmering silk ribbon. Very classy, very high society, just like my mother always insisted everything should be. The greeting card was the final touch. I wrote Mr. Thompson in my best calligraphy, followed by his full name and address, along with a small, carefully worded note. Thought you might want to know who your wife really is. That one was for his unsuspecting spouse, who I was sure would be a prominent guest at Mom's meticulously planned party. She'd specifically mentioned her when boasting about her sophisticated guest list. I closed the box, tied it with a beautiful golden bell, the kind that makes a soft, expensive-sounding chime. It looked exactly like what you'd expect an expensive birthday present to look like. Nobody would suspect the explosive truth nestled within until it was far too late. The day of my mother's birthday party arrived, a day I anticipated with a strange mix of dread and wicked glee. I'd arranged everything perfectly. The courier service was scheduled to deliver the gift at precisely 8:30 p.m., the time I knew they'd be starting to open presents, the spotlight firmly on my esteemed mother. I sat in my small apartment that evening, a glass of wine trembling in my hand, nervously checking my phone every few minutes for confirmation. The courier app pinged. Delivered at 8:32 p.m. Now, all I could do was wait. The silence in my apartment amplifying the frantic anticipation thrumming through me. I didn't have to wait long. The next morning, my phone rang at 7:00 a.m. It was my cousin Sarah, her voice practically breathless with a mixture of shock and barely suppressed excitement. "Oh my God, Ashley, you will not believe what happened at the party last night." She didn't even wait for my hesitant "hello" before launching into her dramatic recounting. "It was absolutely insane. So everything was going exactly how Aunt Margaret wanted, all perfect and sophisticated, you know? The country club was decked out, the caterers were serving fancy hors d'oeuvres, everyone was dressed to the nines. Sarah took a dramatic breath before continuing, her voice rising with incredulity. Then they started opening gifts. Aunt Margaret was making this big show of it, reading each card out loud with these overly dramatic pronouncements and gushing over every single ridiculously expensive thing. Then she got to this really elegant cream-colored box with a gold bell. I could picture it perfectly, my mother, the queen bee holding court, the center of attention, probably wearing some obscenely priced designer dress, surrounded by her carefully curated guest list of social climbers and judgmental country club members. She opened the box and saw these rolled-up things tied with ribbons. Sarah continued, her voice laced with a giddy disbelief. She was actually commenting on how beautifully they were presented as she delicately untied the first one. Sarah's voice got higher with excitement. Then she unrolled it, Ashley, and I have never seen someone's face change color so fast in my entire life. It went from the smug, pleased look to pure, unadulterated horror. What happened then? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral, a small, triumphant smile playing on my lips. Everything exploded. The photo showed her kissing some man, and get this, the man and his wife were both at the party. Your dad grabbed the photo, and then he started frantically opening all the other rolls. Each one was worse than the last. There were pictures of them going into a hotel together, holding hands, everything. Sarah was practically giddy with vicarious drama. Your dad just lost it. He lunged across the table at the guy. They started fighting right there, between the tiered cake and the champagne fountain. The guy's wife started screaming at your mom, calling her every name in the book. She was throwing things, glasses, plates, anything she could reach. She was screaming about how they'd been married for 20 years, how they had 3 kids, how your mom was a home wrecking. Sarah trailed off, momentarily lost for words. Some of the guests tried to separate everyone, but it was complete chaos. The perfectly orchestrated party turned into an absolute brawl. Sounds intense, I said carefully, savoring every delicious detail. Sarah lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Can I be honest, Ashley? It was kind of amazing to watch. Your mom has spent years looking down her nose at everyone, acting like she's better than the rest of us, always lecturing everyone about proper behavior and family values. And then this happens? The hypocrisy is just chef's kiss. She actually laughed, a genuine, unrestrained sound. I know I probably shouldn't say this, but it couldn't have happened to a more deserving person. I thought about my mother's perfectly planned party, her carefully cultivated image, her precious high society friends, all of it shattering like the champagne glasses her lover's wife had hurled across the room. A profound sense of satisfaction, sharp and sweet, washed over me. Within days, the fallout began. I heard from various relatives that Dad had moved out of the house and was staying at a hotel. He'd already contacted his lawyer about filing for divorce. I wasn't surprised by Dad's reaction. He'd always been fiercely proud, maybe to a fault, and this kind of public humiliation was something his rigid sense of honor couldn't forgive. What did surprise me was his phone call a few days later. Ashley. His voice sounded different, older somehow, more uncertain. I need to ask you something. I'm going to have DNA tests done on all 3 of you. I need some samples from you, hair and saliva. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't anticipated this particular development, though perhaps I should have, given the seismic shift in their relationship. You think we might not be. I don't know what to think anymore. He cut in, his voice thick with a weariness I'd never heard before. After discovering your mother's activities, I'm not sure of anything. Can I get the samples? Of course, Dad, I said, a strange mix of apprehension and a dawning understanding washing over me. You can come by any time. He came by that afternoon. I'd never seen him look so defeated. His shoulders were slumped, his face drawn and pale. This wasn't the stern, confident father I remembered. This was a broken man trying to piece together the shattered remnants of his life. I watched as he carefully collected the samples, placing them in sterile containers, his hands trembling slightly. 2 weeks crawled by. I tried not to dwell on the implications of the tests, but it was impossible not to wonder, to speculate. Then Dad called again. "Ashley, can I come over?" His voice was strange, tight with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. "We need to talk." 20 minutes later, he was sitting on my worn couch, staring down at his hands as if they held the answers to all his questions. "I got the results," he said finally, his voice barely a whisper. "You're mine, only you, the twins. They're not mine. Your mother, she confessed everything." He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed with pain. "She had an affair years ago. The man, she loved him deeply, but he wouldn't leave his family for her. So she settled for having his children. He died a few years back." A wave of understanding washed over me, explaining so much of the inexplicable favoritism, the constant validation of the twins, the subtle but persistent dismissal of me. "I've cut off contact with the twins," Dad continued, his voice bitter. "I can't even look at them now. Every time I see them, I see the lies, the betrayal." The pieces were finally clicking into place, forming a devastating picture of deceit and manipulation. "She loved him, and she loved his children," Dad said, his voice thick with unshed tears. "But she never really loved me. And you?" He looked at me, real, agonizing pain etched on his face. "You were mine. So she pushed you aside, made you the outsider in your own home. And God, Ashley, I let her do it. I let her turn me against my only real child." He reached for my hand, then stopped himself, a gesture of profound regret. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I was a terrible father to you, but if you'd be willing, if you'd let me try, I'd like to have a relationship with my daughter, my real daughter." I looked at this broken man, my father, and felt a complicated mix of emotions. Anger, yes, but also a strange sense of pity, a flicker of something akin to hope, and a profound, weary sadness for all the lost years. I'll think about it," I said finally. It was all I could offer right then. My mother's call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the middle of a crucial work meeting when my phone lit up with her number. I excused myself, my heart sinking with a premonition of the storm that was about to break, and stepped out to take it. "I know it was you," she said without preamble, her voice cold, controlled, but I could hear the barely suppressed fury simmering beneath the surface. "The birthday gift, the photos, all of it. It was you." I didn't hesitate. Yes, it was. The carefully constructed control in her voice finally cracked. "How dare you humiliate me like that, in front of everyone?" "You want to talk about humiliation?" I laughed, the sound surprisingly steady, and it felt good. "How about spending my entire childhood as your unpaid servant? How about being told I wasn't good enough to attend your precious birthday party because I didn't have a college degree? That's different, right?" "No, Mother, it's not different. You deliberately belittled me my entire life. You turned Dad against me. You turned the twins against me. You made me feel like I wasn't good enough to be part of this family. Well, guess what? Turns out I'm the only one who actually belongs in it." There was a long, stunned silence on the other end of the line. "You've ruined everything," she finally said, her voice trembling with a raw, wounded fury. "No, Mother," I replied, the words laced with a cold, hard truth. "You ruined everything. I just exposed the truth. Maybe next time you're lecturing someone about morality and proper behavior, you'll remember your own actions." I hung up before she could unleash the full force of her wrath. The months that followed brought massive, irreversible changes to our fractured family. Dad's divorce was finalized quickly. He had excellent lawyers and a rock-solid case. Mother tried to secure a substantial settlement, but the overwhelming evidence of her infidelity, combined with the undeniable DNA test results, left her with little leverage. She ended up with a modest monetary settlement, nowhere near the lavish lifestyle she'd probably envisioned for herself. Last I heard, she'd moved to another city, a self-imposed exile. Good riddance, as far as I was concerned. The family gossip mill, of course, was working overtime. But surprisingly, most of our relatives seemed to harbor a secret satisfaction at my mother's downfall. "Your mother had it coming," my Aunt Carol told me over a surprisingly enjoyable lunch one afternoon. Always looking down her nose at everyone, acting like she was some kind of saint. Do you know she once spent an entire Thanksgiving dinner lecturing me about my parenting skills? Miss High and Mighty herself, preaching about family values while she was. Aunt Carol shook her head and chuckled, a sound of genuine amusement. As for Dad, we're slowly, tentatively building a real relationship, a genuine connection that was never allowed to flourish before. He calls regularly, and I've had him over for dinner a few times. He's still grappling with the enormity of the betrayal, the years of deception, but I can see him starting to heal, to find a measure of peace. Sometimes, just sometimes, he even smiles again. A genuine, unguarded smile that warms my heart in a way I never thought possible. The twins. I haven't spoken to them since everything came to light. They tried calling a few times in the beginning, their voices filled with a desperate, self-pitying tone, but I blocked their numbers without a second thought. What could they possibly say to make up for a lifetime of casual cruelty, of being complicit in my marginalization? Some might call it revenge, this unraveling of my mother's carefully constructed facade, but I call it justice. My mother spent years constructing a perfect image, presenting herself as a paragon of virtue while treating me like a second-class citizen in my own family. All I did was show everyone who she really was. Valuable lesson: the pursuit of external validation and the creation of a false image, especially at the expense of genuine human connection and fairness, will ultimately crumble under the weight of truth. Prioritizing superficial appearances over the well-being of loved ones can lead to profound and irreversible consequences. True strength lies not in maintaining a flawless facade, but in embracing authenticity and treating others with respect and equity. What are your thoughts on Ashley's actions? Do you believe it was justified, or could she have handled the situation differently? Share your opinions in the comments below. If you enjoyed the story of dramatic revelation and long overdue justice, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more compelling narratives.